Konnichiwa, hello everybody. Well, it's been a while since I've posted here on the channel, and even longer since I last updated you on my project Basic Japanese. So that's what I thought I'd do today. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Dr. Gareth Popkins. Here we talk on and off about language learning in all its aspects really, not only my own projects, but interviews with inspiring movers and shakers from the world of language learning and other learners, reviews, and a bit of method and language learning related vlogging. Project Basic Japanese then. I started learning the language in January 2019. I've been aiming to do a focused study slot of 30 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week. So what I'm aiming to do is to internalise the basic grammar patterns, the basic sentence patterns, really for all the major structures in the language, and to build up a core vocabulary of about 2,000 words, trying wherever possible to learn chunks of language, so not to learn individual words only, but also to learn example sentences of them so that I can learn them in context, which helps me to remember, and of course so that I know that I'm using them correctly and realistically. So that's the method I'm using. It is very much a sort of studious, methodical, study-first approach. No dramatic transformations, but there are wins I want to share with you and things that maybe aren't going so well and which will influence how I tweak my approach in the coming months and things I'd have done differently if I was starting again now. Now, I've been organising my focus study around a number of language courses. That gives me a backbone, a spine, something to work through. And the two books I've actually stuck with are both very old books. This one, a very old version of Teach Yourself Japanese. And then the other book which I'm using, another old version of the colloquial series, and this is Colloquial Japanese. So this old version, which is much more up-to-date, conversationally based than the Teach Yourself book. And in those focus study slots then, working with the Teach Yourself and the colloquials basically, I'm trying to be as interactive as possible. So I'm doing two-way translations, I'm studying the dialogues, particularly in the colloquial book, listening to the audio there, the grammar patterns and the example sentences from both books, doing the exercises, using the audio that came with the colloquials book or that I had made for Teach Yourself Japanese to do listening transcribing exercises, good old dictation, what I call laser listening, which I find very effective. So trying to work in as interactive a way as possible with those courses. So between August 21 and March 22, I've put in another 55 hours and 30 minutes. The grand total then now is 541 hours and 50 minutes focus study on Japanese. And yeah, I had a good months and not so good months. So my best month actually in the period August to March was January this year, when I put in 16 hours, 45 minutes. Managed to study on 26 of the 31 days of that month. But last December, the month before, was my worst month. And it was partly, because of that I tried to pull my socks up in January. But in December last year, I only did 3 hours and 10 minutes, or studied on 7 days. Christmas sort of got in the way a bit then. On the plus side, I am happy with my decision actually not to try and speak early this time. And I've been focusing very much on getting through the core grammar patterns, the core sentence structures of the language, and really having worked through those two pretty comprehensive courses, the Teach Yourself and the colloquial, I think I've covered all the major structures. I've been doing a lot of listening as well from the start. So first I followed the Pimsleur audio course, but now I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I probably spend at least half an hour a day listening to Japanese when I'm on my walks or jogs in the park. And that's been the case for the last 2 years, really. And it certainly helps bring alive what I'm covering in my textbooks. And my appetite for that, podcasts all in Japanese, aimed mainly at learners, but 1 or 2 native level ones, which I understand very little, is undiminished, because I do enjoy trying to just pick out phrases or even items of vocabulary in the more advanced stuff. Although obviously it's more efficient to listen to stuff that's level appropriate, where I've got a fighting chance of understanding more than individual words. So a lot of listening from the start was good. Another thing that's gone well has been to nail the kana, the syllabaries, 2 of the 3 writing systems that you'd find used in any typical Japanese sentence, right at the beginning. For my written exercises and my dictation, I am using the kana. But it was right, I think, to pause the work on the kanji. So the Chinese characters, there are just over 2,200 of them that a high school graduate, for example, would need to know. But in the time I'm prepared to put into this project, I prefer to work on my vocabulary, my listening skills, and later on speaking practice. So the kanji are paused. As to things that haven't gone so well, I've already mentioned that I think I spent too long on the kanji in the early stages. If I had my time again, I would simply demystify the system and then pause them and come back to them as a separate project. Because I think it's going to take 2 years pretty serious work to learn those kanji, the sort of 2,200, and a lot longer practicing reading them before you can actually properly sit down and read pretty well. That's something I look forward to doing, but in due course. It's not a race, after all, for me. I also regret that it took me too long to find resources that I got on with. I wouldn't start again with Japanese from zero, and I must do a separate review of that course because it does have its strengths, but it didn't work for me. So I think maybe we should be quicker to ditch resources if they don't click for us. And I'm pleased now with the resources that I am using. And the other thing is that despite the interactive methods I've tried to use, I just don't think that my recall of the grammar patterns and the core vocabulary is good enough. It doesn't give me the confidence to want to start speaking. I do feel I need a base I can draw on, and it just isn't sticking in my head at this stage. How am I going to get more confident then in my ability to recall and actually have a stab at producing these basic grammar patterns, which I feel pretty familiar with, and the core vocabulary? Well, the answer for me really is back to the future. And going back to a low-tech technique, which I used in the earlier decades, really, of my language learning, but which I've moved away from, particularly in my most recent project before Japanese, which was Basque. And that is flashcards. Good old, actually, paper flashcards. So my project now, basically between now and I hope the end of the summer, is to have flashcarded in terms of making the cards, but also actively learned all the vocab and the grammar patterns in this book. That's my aim. That, I think, will give me an active base of rickety, clunking Japanese, but enough to draw on to then start to speak. When I've done that, when I've carded up and worked up those patterns and that vocabulary, I don't think I'll have any more excuses for not diving in and doing a lot of speaking. So that is the plan. In addition to that, I'll be continuing to listen an awful lot to the podcasts. And of course, in doing that, I'll be hearing time and time again the high-frequency words that I'm learning from the book. So there you are, that's an update on Project Japanese. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it's going and hear about what's been happening in your language learning life down in the comments below. If you're a regular, please do drop me a comment. If you're new here again, once again, a very big welcome. And I look forward to seeing you again soon here on the channel. If you haven't yet subscribed for the vibe, please do. And maybe throw me a thumbs up, tickle that bell, and share the affair. See you soon. Ja mata ne!